I want to have as much grace as I can towards this as possible. With that said, that's where I'd say I don't think we should be leaning into this.
Yeah.
I think we should be going the opposite direction from that for a lot of reasons.
Well, I ask because I remember catching a lot of the backlash afterwards and being called a liberal and being called these crazy things. And I just thought it was interesting that I could have public conversations with people I disagree with, but if I go to a conference with some of the same people I've publicly disagreed with, that I'm somehow enabling and promoting them. So
Ruslan.
you said identity, which was really interesting because in your video you got hit with that conversion therapy thing.
You sent me that
from YouTube, which I was like, oh, this is interesting. So identity, I want to accurately steel man this. I think it's the idea that you can be a Christian, not in the sense that you're before Christian, but just in the sense that that is a placeholder, a word that can define someone as same-sex attracted, not necessarily same-sex practicing, and they are, their identity is that they're same-sex attracted. We'll get to like, is same-sex attraction in and of itself sinful or not, and what. This could be kind of like the side B movement, right? What do you make of that? And do you think that's helpful?
So a lot of individuals with same-sex attraction feel misunderstood. They feel a lot of shame. They've told me, I've read about. So I want to approach this with as much sympathy as possible, where people are looking to say, oh, you have same-sex attraction, maybe you can uniquely understand my experience. Like, I want to have as much grace as I can towards this as possible. With that said, part of the question is, what does it mean to have a identity? What does that mean? Now, you would hear people like, I think Wesley Hill and Nate Collins and others say it's kind of an orientation I have towards the world. Maybe it affects the books that I read, the conversations I'm drawn to, the relationships I've drawn to. So then this identity becomes much more than, say, same-sex attraction. Now, my question would be, does everybody with same-sex attraction have that same kind of orientation towards the world? Obviously not.
Right. Because that's kind of a cliche.
It's a little stereotypical.
It's stereotypical, yeah.
And then there's some people who have that kind of orientation that don't have same-sex attraction.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't seem to me like that same-sex attraction uniquely maps onto a way of seeing the world only for this group of people. So that gives me pause. So I'm hesitant to say, oh, same-sex attraction identity is much more than same-sex attraction for the reasons that we mentioned. On the flip side, is it any less than same-sex attraction? Can you take that component out of it? And I don't see how you can. That's a necessary component that would tie certain people together. They would say, I'm not sexually attracted to a female. In the case of males, I'm sexually attracted to a male. So if at least a minimalistic part of identity is same sexual attraction, why are we leaning into that? Why are we making that a part of who we are? That's different than saying I'm an American. That's different than saying I'm a divorced Christian, which is a couple examples that Preston gave. That's where I'd say I don't think we should be leaning into this. I think we should be going the opposite direction from that for a lot of reasons.
Well, the tricky part with that is then there's also the social contagion component, which is, you know, what is it, 25% or 30% of Gen Z are now identifying as a part of the LGBT community. What does that mean for how much? And you know, I want to say from, was it your generation, it was like 5%. My generation was 10%. Now it's like 25 or 30%.
Wait, my generation, how old are you?
I'm 40.
Okay, I'm 48. You're an Xer, or you're a millennial?
I'm a millennial,
okay,
baby.
All right, fair enough.
I'm a millennial.
My generation, yours.
Yeah, so it's doubled.
I'll go with it. I'll go with that.
It's doubled every generation, though. And so if it's doubled every generation, is there something that's social about it where it's trendy to a certain degree? How trendy, you know, that's up for debate, but it seems like there's that. So if we're not talking as a stereotypical identity and you're in these types of music and Taylor Swift, or I don't know what the cliche identity is. That definitely seems like you could be enabling the social contagion aspect, which again, I don't know the data on it, but it definitely seems to be some aspect of like, yeah, it's trendy, it's popular, and it gives you an identity to be a part of a bigger community than you, which historically has always been faith, you know, in your local church and your local tribe. Now you could just wave the wand and say, I'm a part of the LGBT. Even the word queer is such a weird, like,
Yeah, it's
you can't even
shifted.
pin the word down anymore.
Yeah.
So how much do you think there is to the social aspect of it, the social contagion aspect, where it's not people that actually deal with any sort of desires, that they join the community and then they start experimenting and exploring, and then before you know it, they're doing stuff that maybe they never intended to do.
I think the case is probably strongest when it comes to the T with the rapid onset gender dysphoria that Abigail Schreier has laid out in her book, Irreversible Damage.
Yeah.
I think it's particularly strong that's there.
Yeah.
The point that I was trying to make, and maybe some people think it's a good point, maybe they don't, is if we lean into identity and if we lean into pronoun hospitality, then we have some complicity with how these ideas are pushed and promoted in our culture.
That's good.
So I don't know how you say to a male, oh, you are a she, but you can't use, how did I do this? You are a she, but you can't use the female bathroom. You can't play women's sports.
Yeah.
Now, Preston obviously made the point. He's like, I'm against men playing in women's sports, and that's fine. But I don't know how you keep that together when you use that language. Now, he did say, he's like, we're talking about private conversations, not public. But we've both written publicly on this, and we're actually having the conversation publicly. You can't avoid that. So I don't know the exact data on that, but as Christians, do we want to lean into that and have complicity with that, or say, actually, no, there's male and female, and our identity is rooted in something else? That's where I think Christians should lean into.
That's good. And I have a macro question. But before that, guys, Dr. Sean McDowell is going to be with us at the Bless God Summit happening March 27th, 28th, 29th in Carlsbad, California. Go to blessgodsummit.com. We have an amazing lineup with some of your favorite Christian podcasters, preachers, pastors. Dallas Jenkins will be there. God Logic, Gavin Ortland, David Wood, John McCrae from What Do You Mean? So join me and Dr. Sean McDowell at the Bless God Summit at the end of March. Is the critique towards me, is the critique towards you in being affiliated with the Preston valid, in that are we complicit by standing next to him, by going to his conference? Are we complicit in some of this stuff? Because I think that's a lot of the backlash I've gotten. I did, because I was in Babylon last year, which I thought was a great conference. And I think when you're there, it's totally different than what's being presented by the media, right? So then, is that critique valid? Are you and I, in a way, complicit by standing next to him?
So I have no problem going to his conference.
Neither,
At all.
Neither do I.
In fact, I'm actually looking forward to it a lot. I think he is as good as anybody at having difficult conversations with people who see the world differently. I love his podcast. No, I've told him, we've had this. I'm like, sometimes I'd like to see you push back more. I'm not sure what you believe. And there's maybe some people you're having on. I'm like, wait a minute, this person believes something out of bounds. So like, we've had that conversation and we navigate that a little bit differently. But I appreciate he's willing to have difficult conversations. So I'm going to go to his conference and I'm going to listen to a lot of these. And I might disagree with both sides. I might agree with one side. But I love that kind of conversation when people are willing to have it. Now, what I told him is, I said, look, if I go to a conference, I'm not supporting what's on that conference. It's the conference that's bringing me in to support me, so to speak. I'm having a conversation there with Adam Davidson, who's my buddy who describes himself tongue-in-cheek as an atheist New York media elite. New Yorker, New York Times, The Atlantic. We're talking about writing a book and doing a documentary together, like kind of bridging worlds between the two of us. So we're going to hopefully have that conversation in a whole bunch of different settings. Left-leaning settings, Christian universities, secular universities, maybe at the New York Times, maybe at Christianity Today. I have no idea. So I don't view as supporting something by going and having a conversation there. he's got to answer the question. And I pressed him a little bit in the conversation. He gave his thoughts, and people can watch that and decide what they think.
Yeah.
When you bring somebody in, why do you bring that person in? Which is like, why do I have Brandon Robertson on my channel? Why do I have fill in the blank on my channel? Those are questions we have to answer. Now, does that mean I'd send anybody to a conference like Preston's? Well, probably not. I mean, I'm thinking about bringing my 12-year-old. But if I do, like afterwards, I'd say, hey, what'd you think? And I would dialogue and I would process it with them. I mean, so no, I don't think that at all. I'm looking forward to going.
Yeah, I asked because I remember catching a lot of the backlash afterwards and being called a liberal and being called these crazy things. And I just thought it was interesting that I could have public conversations with people I disagree with, but if I go to a conference with some of the same people I've publicly disagreed with, that I'm somehow enabling and promoting them. So Tim Whitaker was at the Exiles in Babylon conference. That was a great panel, in my opinion. They highlighted 4 different people that deconstructed. Tim was one of them. There was a Catholic girl that became even more conservative, and then there was 2 other people. And then they did a panel, and I was like, oh, this is fantastic. But for whatever reason, some of the backlash was that just even being affiliated with Preston meant that it was a full-on endorsement of everything and everyone he endorses.
Sure. I mean, look, I think I've been on Tim's podcast twice. I appreciate him bringing me on. We had good conversations. What does that mean about him endorsing me? Well, certainly thinks I'm wrong about a bunch of stuff. I think he's wrong about a bunch of stuff. We got to be willing to have these conversations. I get a little bit tired of like, oh, wait, you're this event and this person is here and they platform that person and they wrote in a book this. I'm like, just calm down a little bit. I mean, you can drag something up on anybody and make them look guilty, make them look bad. I mean, somebody was online going, Sean is woke for going to the conference. And I was like, yeah, my friend Thaddeus Williams, a Biola professor, who in my view, along with Neil Shenvi, I think wrote the best book. It's called Confronting Injustice Without Compromising Truth, critiquing critical theory and critical race theory. I think it's one of the best 2 books. Like, he is solid and conservative. He's Calvinist. He's reformed. He's there. So if I'm woke, he's woke. He's not woke, so I'm not woke by going to this conference. We need to stop this guilt by association. With that said, I do understand some of the criticism that people say is like, wait a minute, you talk to a person about A, but this person has also said B, and that's heretical, dangerous ideas. Are we bringing this idea to some people who might not be able to process that well? That's a fair question, and I think about that a lot. I'm not saying I always navigate that well, but that should be in the back of our minds as well. But I mean, the last thing I would say is I'm not running a church on YouTube. I'm a professor. I'm an apologist, but part of being a professor is like exploring ideas. We invite people in. We had Wesley Hill and Justin Lee at Biola years ago. And we're like, we're just going to have a conversation. We want our students to hear this and have a conversation. We're going to guide Biola students through how to thoughtfully approach this. And I love that Biola did that. So I'm a professor. That's my lane. If I was pastoring a church,
it was a bit different, maybe.
Who I platform and who I don't, I probably would navigate that a little bit.
So in light of all this, you alluded to the guilty by association fallacy, which I think is so prevalent, right? So it's like anyone that you're friends with and who they're friends with and who their friends with, it, like now you're just lumped in with everyone, which I find extremely frustrating and exhausting. But how do you go about picking these conversations and selecting your guests? Because I think sometimes people always do wonder, what is the thought process? What is the behind the scenes? Is it just relational? Are people reaching out? What is your personal process for finding guests to have these conversations with?
So if I'm going to bring on like a Christian, I want someone who's actually an expert, who can give something novel to my audience. Or I also look for people with really interesting stories, like ex-Muslims. I have some fascinating one coming up with somebody who's totally into Wicca and New Age, and then it kind of weaves apologetics into it. Those are somewhat easy if you find the right person. And recently, I try to do more and more homework on somebody's backstory just to make sure that there's not something that's there going, oh my goodness, they embrace prosperity theology. Maybe I shouldn't platform this person. So you can't do an exhaustive research. I try to be careful and do my due diligence. I'll send names to my team and I'll say things like, hey, Look into this person. What do you see? Any red flags? So try to do that. Can't find everything. That's a piece of it. As far as the more dialogues that I have, I ask a couple questions. I say, okay, is this going to move the ball forward and help people? So in the case of Preston, he's getting criticism from here, criticism from there. I'm getting criticism. There's all people talking past one another.
Yep.
And I was like, Preston, can we just have this face to face? And then at least people can look at it and say, here's what Sean believes. Here's what Preston believes. Here's where the debate is at right now.
Yeah.
Clarity is one of the biggest things that I'm aiming for.
Yeah.
More than anything is clarity. I don't have any interest. I don't get as many requests as Wes Huff does right now. He did a whole video, like, I think he titled it, I Won't Debate You.
Yep.
Since being on Rogan, he's like gotten hundreds of people that want to debate him. I don't get that many, but daily get some kind of like, debate me on this, debate me on that. And I'm kind of like, I'm not just interested in debating for the sake of debating.
Yeah.
I actually don't want to have formal debates. I've had them. I think people now want more substantive, thoughtful, respectful conversations where we disagree, but humanize one another. And I think both Preston and Brandon were examples of that in different ways.
Yeah.
And so I look at them as guests and say, am I bringing on a guest who I think is willing to give a little push and take, who's going to be respectful? So I'm willing to dialogue with many people. I don't know that I'd say most, who want to have a good faith conversation and dialogue. That's what I look for.
Yeah.
Ahead of time.
Hey, thank you so much for checking out the video. Please be sure to comment below and subscribe and all that good stuff. And check out this other video that YouTube seems to be recommending just for you. Let me know if they nailed it. All right, I'll see you over there. Peace.